I discovered HOA builds snow removal on a street they don't maintain. One complaint froze their budget. The night the HOA finally pushed too far, the snow was coming down sideways. I was out in my beat-up Carhartt, boots crunching through drifts, trying to dig out Mr. Lawson's driveway. He's 82, bad knees, oxygen tank. City plow had just gone by, left that lovely 3-foot wall at the end of his drive, like always. I'm halfway through shoving it back in the street when I hear it. That clipped little cough Diane does instead of saying, "Excuse me." I turn around, and there she is, parka white as the snow, clipboard in hand, not a flake on her perfect boots. "Michael," she says, all fake sweet. "We need to talk about your violations and your snow fee delinquency." She actually tilted the paper so the neighbors could see. She points past me toward the end of the subdivision. "That entire street you live off? HOA has to pay extra to keep it clear. People like you don't understand budgets, but those trucks are expensive. Thing is, I work on those trucks. I know every plow route in this part of Cleveland better than she knows her own reflection." I looked at the tracks, the salt pattern, the cut of the blade, and my stomach went cold. That wasn't our contractor. So why was the HOA billing us for it? If you've ever been shaken down by an HOA that thinks it's City Hall, stick around and hit subscribe, because Diane had no idea who she just tried to humiliate. I didn't move to Cleveland Heights for the HOA. I moved there for the kind of winter where you know your neighbors by the sound of their snowblower. I grew up on the east side. My dad ran a little diesel shop. I grew up around busted knuckles and broken leaf springs. These days I'm the guy the city calls at 3 a.m. when a plow blade twists or a salt spreader seizes up. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an accountant. But I know winter operations like other people know football stats. When my wife, Jenna, and I scraped together enough to buy this place, it felt like a win. Small 3-bedroom, 1-car garage, a maple tree out front that the realtor swore would be gorgeous in October. Yeah, and buried in March. Still, it was ours. The listing said quiet private community, managed HOA, amenities. I read the covenants once, saw nothing insane, and figured, how bad could it be? The first year was fine. A couple of silly emails about trash cans and seasonal decor, but the dues weren't terrible and the snow got cleared mostly. I shoveled my driveway, helped the older folks like Lawson and Mrs. Patel next door, and the HOA's contractor did the main loop. We waved at each other, lived our lives. Then Diane got elected president. You know how you can just tell when someone's never had to do their own dirty work? She showed up at the fall meeting in heels, PowerPoint ready, talking about raising standards and protecting property values. People clapped because the slideshow had pretty stock photos of manicured lawns and kids on bikes. I just sat in the back, smelling the cheap coffee and listening. She made a big deal about unsafe parking and visual clutter. Translation: she didn't like work trucks. That got my attention because my work truck is how my mortgage gets paid. I park it in my own driveway, commercial logo on the door, DOT numbers on the side. Legal. Inspected. Insured. A week later, I got my first bright yellow envelope from the HOA. Notice of violation. Commercial vehicle storage. They wanted me to hide my truck somewhere else because it disrupted community aesthetics. Jenna read it twice and looked at me. Can they even do that? Depends how much they want to fight, I said. I sent a calm email with photos, pointing out there was nothing in the CC and RS about work vehicles and driveways. I figured they'd back off. Instead, Diane replied from her HOA email, all polite poison. While your interpretation is noted, the board has broad discretion to define community standards. People move here for a certain look. People, not workers, apparently. I swallowed it. Paid the silly administrative fee to appeal. Went to the next meeting, sat through her little speech about how the rules apply equally to everyone, while she side-eyed my Carhartt like it was contagious. And for a while, it felt like maybe that was the end of it. I kept my head down, did my job, shoveled the block when the city got behind. For a while, it even felt like we'd finally found a place we could breathe. Until the snow came back, and Diane's first friendly reminder turned into a threat with a $sign attached. The first real shot they fired that winter showed up on cheap paper, folded twice, taped crooked to my front door. Notice, special winter assessment. I remember brushing snow off the top of it with my glove, already tired from a double shift. Jenna was wrangling the kids inside. Soup on the stove, house finally warm. I'm thinking I'll grab a shower and crash. Instead, I'm on the porch, reading that I supposedly owed an extra $250 for unbudgeted snow removal expenses on the Eastern Access Road. The Eastern Access Road was the skinny dead-end street off the back of our subdivision. My street, the one that tied into the city route. The one the city had plowed every winter since before half these houses existed. At first I figured it was just Diane being Diane. Then I saw the line. Repeated obstruction by resident commercial vehicles has required additional passes and emergency salting. Resident commercial vehicles. That was me. My truck. My livelihood. I walked inside and handed the letter to Jenna. She read it, eyebrows climbing, then looked at me. They can't be serious. Oh, they're serious, I said. Question is if they're stupid or just counting on everyone else being. Later that week, there was a mandatory winter safety meeting in the clubhouse. Translation, Diane wanted a stage. I showed up straight from the shop, still in my work pants, Carhartt smelling like diesel and road salt. Diane was at the front in that white parka, hair perfect, big color printout of a budget slide behind her like she was running a Fortune 500, not a 30-house subdivision. She clicked to a slide labeled Snow Removal Overages. A red bar shot up off the chart. As you can see, she said, doing that tight smile, our costs for maintaining the Eastern Access Road have skyrocketed due to certain residents' choices. Larger vehicles, poor parking, and frankly, disregard for community guidelines have forced our contractor to make extra trips. Her eyes landed right on me. Heads turned. I heard a couple whispers. The guy who lives 2 doors down, software something, actually shifted his chair away like work trucks were contagious. Diane held up the letter I'd gotten, like exhibit. We've had to implement a modest special assessment focused on the homes directly impacting that area. It's only fair that the people causing the problem help pay to fix it. My ears burned, not from shame, from the quiet, familiar anger of being blamed by someone who's never held a shovel in their life. I raised my hand. Question, has the scope of the snow contract changed? Because that road's on the city route. Been that way since before I was born. She gave me that condescending tilt of her head. Mike, with all due respect, people who work with equipment don't always see the bigger financial picture. The HOA has to pay to keep our access usable when the city falls short. That's just reality. A couple people chuckled politely. I let her finish her little performance. Talk of protecting property values and sending a message to repeat offenders. On the way out, as folks pulled on their North Face and talked about ski trips, I stood in the entryway staring out at the streetlights reflecting on packed snow. Out there, I could see the telltale twin lines where the plow had gone through earlier. Narrow cut, curved just a little on the right, salt spread heavier on the crown than the edge. It was the city's pattern, plain as a VIN number on a frame. If I'd been any other guy, maybe I would have grumbled and paid the stupid fee. But I spend my nights underneath those trucks. I know every route map, every contract clause, every shortcut a lazy contractor tries, because I'm the one fixing what they break. And that evening, standing in the glow of the clubhouse exit sign, I realized something was really, really off. They weren't just picking on the blue-collar guy with the ugly truck. They were charging us for snow they didn't even move. If you've ever had an HOA blame you for something you know for a fact isn't your fault, hit like right now because that letter, that was just Diane's first mistake. That night, I thought it was just a greedy board trying to shake me down. I had no idea it was only the first test. After that safety meeting, the neighborhood changed, and not in the way Diane had promised. You could feel it in the air on our little loop. The looks lasted a half second longer. Conversations died when I walked past in my work pants. My truck, which used to just be Mike's rig, suddenly turned into that big eyesore on the corner. The next morning, I stepped outside with my coffee, and there it was, another neon envelope flapping under my wiper blade like a disease flag. Parking warning. Interferes with snow operations. I laughed out loud. My truck was backed into my own driveway, tires 2 feet from the sidewalk, exactly where it had been for 3 winters without a peep. Across the street, Mrs. Patel's curtains twitched. She gave me this guilty little wave, like she just watched someone get called to the principal's office and didn't want to be seen talking to him. By the end of the week, the social stuff started. Someone created a neighborhood winter safety group on Facebook. The cover photo was a stock image of a perfectly plowed cul-de-sac. The first post was a long paragraph from Diane about residents whose choices are putting all of us at risk. No names, of course, but she included a blurry, zoomed-in photo of a dark work truck with a logo on the door. My logo. Comments rolled in from people I'd helped dig out at 5 a.m. Some folks just don't respect community standards. We didn't move here to live next to a construction yard. Meanwhile, I was the one dragging my snowblower over to clear their mailboxes. Little printed notes started appearing on my garbage cans and mailbox. Please be considerate. This is a family neighborhood. Someone even slid a typed letter under my door about how tradespeople sometimes don't understand HOA culture, signed concerned neighbors. Yeah, because culture is apparently not having calluses. At the next board meeting, the chairs were set up in this stiff little semicircle. Diane sat dead center, parka off, blazer on, glasses low on her nose like a TV judge. The agenda had a whole section titled Resident Education, Snow Compliance. She clicked through a slideshow of problem behaviors, cars parked on the street, basketball hoops, trash cans, and then a picture of my driveway, with my truck circled in red. This kind of vehicle, she said, voice sugar-coated, creates both an image problem and an operational challenge. Our contractor has informed us that it forces additional passes on the Eastern Access Road to keep things safe. Those passes cost money. A murmur went through the room. A couple of the young professionals nodded like she'd just presented peer-reviewed science. I raised an eyebrow. Funny, their trucks must be invisible because I've never once seen your contractor touch that road. She didn't miss a beat. Mike, we appreciate your perspective as a service provider, but the board relies on our vendors' reports. We can't run this community on gut feelings and anecdotes. People chuckled. I was now the anecdote. After the meeting, as folks lined up for coffee and cookies, Diane worked the room like a politician, leaning in close, hand on forearm, whispering. I caught fragments. We've had multiple complaints. He got very defensive. These types don't always get why we have standards. By the time I made it to the door, a dad I'd helped jumpstart his minivan last January actually avoided eye contact, suddenly fascinated by the bulletin board about lost mittens. The thing is, I can take being the truck guy. I've been the truck guy my whole life. What I couldn't take was the way their little social campaign started scaring the people who actually depended on clear roads. Mr. Lawson shuffled over one afternoon, hat pulled down against the wind. Mike, some gal from the board said I should call the HOA if I need help with snow. Said you're causing trouble. I don't want to get in the middle. His eyes were embarrassed. They'd gone to my 82-year-old neighbor and implied I was the problem. That's when something in me went from irritated to cold, steady angry. The sticky notes, the whispers, the Facebook shade. Every little move Diane made to turn the neighborhood against me went into the same mental folder. Because while she was busy playing queen of the cul-de-sac, I was noticing something she wasn't. Every note, every meeting slide, every line about extra passes on the Eastern Access Road was another piece of their own story, and they were writing it down for me. They still thought they were just shaming the mechanic with the ugly truck. They had no idea that every bit of gossip and every passive-aggressive notice was quietly fueling the file that was going to have their name on it. The social crap was bad, but the day it stopped being petty and started getting dangerous was a Tuesday, right after New Year's. I came home from a 14-hour shift, salt dust in my hair, fingers aching, and there were 2 envelopes wedged in my door instead of one. The first was the usual neon HOA special. The second was thicker, plain white, with urgent stamped in red. I opened Diane's first. Final notice, snow access fee delinquency. They'd rolled the $250 special assessment into a continuing obstruction penalty. Add in late fees, administrative processing, and snow route impact charges, and now I supposedly owed $615. Failure to remit within 10 days, it said, may result in lien proceedings. A lien over fake snow removal on a road the city plowed for free. My jaw clenched. I set it down and opened the second envelope. This one wasn't from the HOA. It was from some bottom-of-the-barrel law office downtown. Diane's new toy. Dear Mr. Rourke, our client, Cedar Ridge Estates, HOA, has alerted us to your pattern of non-compliance and defamatory statements regarding their snow contractor. They actually quoted my email where I'd written, "Your contractor has never once serviced the Eastern Access Road." According to this letter, that was interfering with contractual relationships. They strongly urged me to cease spreading misinformation and warned that continued obstruction of snow operations by your improperly stored commercial vehicle exposes you to civil liability. Jenna read over my shoulder, hand on my back. They can't put a lien on the house over this. Can they? Not legally, I said. Doesn't mean they won't try. 2 days later, the harassment went from paper to metal. I woke up at 5 a.m. to that special kind of quiet you only get in a dumping storm. I looked out the window, street buried, flakes coming sideways under the streetlight. My truck was a white lump at the end of the drive. By 6:30, I'd layered up and went out to fire it up, let it warm before I headed to the shop. Except it wasn't there. The driveway was empty except for 2 clean gouge marks in the slush where a wheel lift had dragged something heavy. For a second, I thought I'd lost my mind. Then I saw the orange tag stuck to my mailbox. Tow notice. Vehicle removed for snow access violation. I just stood there in the blowing snow, staring at the tag, heart hammering. They towed my work truck in the middle of an active storm, off my own driveway, in Cleveland. I called the number on the sticker. Some half-awake dispatcher mumbled the yard address and said, HOA called it in as blocking emergency snow equipment. You can pick it up during business hours. Bring cash. Cash. In a blizzard. To ransom the one thing that pays my mortgage. I called Diane. She answered on the second ring. Chipper. Good morning, Mike. Rough weather, huh? You towed my truck, I said. I could hear my own voice, low and flat. She didn't even pretend to be surprised. The board authorized removal of recurring violations that impede snow safety. We sent multiple warnings. You chose not to comply. It was in my driveway. Again. Our contractor has repeatedly documented that your vehicle forces them to make additional passes on the Eastern Access Road, she said, that smug little cadence back in her voice. Those passes cost everyone money. Actions have consequences. Funny, I said, because the contractor you supposedly hired doesn't run that road. The city does. She gave a tiny, condescending laugh. Mike, we've talked about this. You fix trucks. You don't manage municipal budgets. We have the invoices. If you can't afford the fines, maybe this community isn't a good fit for your kind of lifestyle. You're kind. She'd stranded me in a blizzard and still managed to make it sound like I tracked mud on her white carpet. That was the snap. Not the Facebook gossip, not the yellow envelopes. Standing in blowing snow, staring at the grooves where my truck had been, knowing one self-important HOA president had just jeopardized my job and my neighbor's safety, that's when it clicked. They weren't going to stop. Not when they could weaponize fines, lawyers, even tow trucks, just to make an example out of the blue-collar problem at the end of the cul-de-sac. If I kept absorbing the hits, they'd walk me right into a lien, maybe even get my truck banned outright. And they'd do it with a smile, all while skimming off snow overages on a road they didn't touch. I hung up on Diane mid-sentence. The wind cut through my jacket, but inside, everything went very, very still. They wanted to play hardball with snow operations and paperwork. Fine. I stopped thinking like the guy on the wrong end of their tow truck and started thinking like the guy who knew every bolt on the cities. Because at that point, I finally understood they weren't just petty. They were reckless and greedy. And if I didn't do something, they were going to break a lot more people than me. The thing about working on plow crews for years is you stop seeing snow as weather and start seeing it as data. Blade angle, salt pattern, turnaround points, load cycles, that's all information. And standing there in my empty driveway, wind punching me in the face, I realized I'd been treating this whole HOA mess like a social problem. It wasn't. It was an operations problem. And operations? That's my turf. I walked back inside, stomped my boots off, and sat at the kitchen table. Jenna slid a mug of coffee in front of me without a word. I spread out every notice, every email printout, that toe tag, the lawyer letter. Yellow, white, neon, Diane's greatest hits. Viewed one by one, it was harassment. Viewed together, it was a paper trail. Most people think guys like me just hit stuff with bigger hammers until it works. Truth is, if you can't read a maintenance log like a story, you don't last. You learn to connect tiny details. Who signed what, when the part got swapped, which unit went out on which route. So I started doing what I do at 3 a.m. In the city garage when a whole line of trucks is down and there's a storm overhead. I slowed my breathing and went systematic. I grabbed a legal pad and wrote 3 columns. Column A, what Diane says. Column B, what I've seen with my own 2 eyes. Column C, what can be proven on paper. Under A, I wrote her favorite line. Our contractor has to make additional passes on the Eastern Access Road because of your truck. Under B, city plow pattern, not HOA. Never seen their vendor on that road. Ever. Under C, I left it blank for a second, then felt a little spark. Because I realized something Diane hadn't counted on. I didn't just fix trucks. I fixed the city's trucks. The same city whose logo I'd seen on the door of the rig that cut that road. The same city whose salt mix I could recognize by how it clumped. I knew the guys in streets by first name. I'd welded their busted brackets, swapped their hydraulic lines. I knew roughly what their contracts looked like, where their right-of-way started and ended, how they logged their routes. And if there's one thing city government loves even more than coffee, it's documentation. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Marty Streets. He answered on the second ring, sounded half asleep. Yeah. Marty, it's Rourke. Question for you. That skinny tie-in off Mill Road by Cedar Ridge? Eastern Access, dead end? He grunted. We run it. Why? You sure? HOA over there says they're paying to keep it clear. Charging special snow fees. He actually laughed. They can charge whatever they want. City's got it on our route map since '98. I was still dating my ex when we added that spur. Can you send me the route sheet? I asked. The official one. With timestamps if you got them. He yawned. I'll email you yesterday's log and the seasonal map. Why? Because somebody's double dipping, I said. And they're about to get real cold. By noon, my inbox had 3 beautiful attachments. The GIS map with the route highlighted in city green. The plow log showing passes on my Eastern Access every storm this season, and a service contract excerpt spelling out exactly which streets were municipal responsibility. I printed them big, highlighted the line that listed my street. I pinned the map to the wall over the table with magnets like it was a crime board. Next, I dug into the HOA side. Our covenants were dry as toast, but buried in the back was an exhibit, common areas and private roadways. I'd skimmed it when we bought the place. This time, I read every line. That Eastern Access Road? Not on the list. The HOA maintained the loop, the central entrance, and the little private drive by the playground. That was it. No mention of the tie-in the city had taken over years ago. So Diane's story was already cracked. But I wanted more than cracks. I wanted the whole thing to collapse under its own weight. The next day, on my lunch break at the shop, I logged into the county's public records site. I'm not a lawyer, but public easements and right-of-way maps are just another kind of schematic. I clicked through parcels until I found our subdivision. There was a skinny gray strip labeled as Public Row, running exactly where my problem street sat. Public, not HOA. Back at the table that night, Jenna watched me tape another printout under the first. You're building a case, she said. I'm building a repair order, I corrected. System's busted. I'm just writing up what's broken. She smiled, but her eyes were worried. You're poking the bear. Nah, I said. The bear poked me. I'm just measuring its teeth. I wasn't done. I pulled up the HOA's last annual budget from the portal. Diane loved sending that thing out to show what a responsible steward she was. Line items, pie charts, bold headers. Halfway down the page, under seasonal operations, I saw it. Snow removal, main loop, and entrances. Fine. Right under it, emergency snow access, eastern spur/safety corridor. And next to that, a number that made me whistle low. That one line was almost as big as the entire regular snow contract. Then, In smaller italics, under notes, managed via board-approved safety vendor. Vendor name? Whitmore Community Safety Consulting, LLC. Whitmore. Diane's last name. My blue-collar brain doesn't do corporate shell games, but even I could connect that dot. She wasn't just pushing bogus fees. She was routing them through a company with her name on it. That was the moment something in my chest unlocked. Up until then, this had been personal. My truck, my driveway, my reputation. Now it was bigger. She was shaking down the whole street, double billing for a public service in the middle of winter and funneling it through what sure looked like her own outfit. I sat back, calloused fingers blackened with toner smudges, and looked at the wall. City map, plow logs, county row, HOA covenants, budget page with Whitmore circled in red Sharpie. I wasn't just some guy complaining about snow anymore. I was the only person in that subdivision who could read every one of those documents and understand exactly how badly we were being played. In that moment, I stopped reacting to whatever colored envelope Diane felt like taping to my door. I started planning, because I finally had the thing she couldn't bully, tow, or gossip away. Cold, boring, absolutely lethal proof that her story and reality did not match. And I knew one more thing Diane definitely didn't. When city money and private money start crossing streams over public streets, there are people way above an HOA board who take that very, very seriously. Once I saw Whitmore Safety Consulting on that budget line, the game changed from annoyance to diagnostics. This wasn't just a squeaky belt. This was metal on metal. So I did what I do with a failing truck. I started a work order. First step was locking down every pattern they'd been trying to gaslight me about. Next storm, I set my alarm for 3:45 a.m. I was up before the coffee finished dripping, layered up, and parked myself by the front window with my phone on video. At 4:12 on the dot, I saw the orange strobe coming up Mill. City rig. I knew that truck like a family member. Unit 27, because the right rear marker light flickers when he hits a bump. I hit record. He rolled past the subdivision entrance, dropped his blade at the mouth of our little spur, did one clean pass in, backed out, salted on the way. Never even glanced at our HOA loop. When the sun finally dragged itself up, I walked that whole so-called eastern access with a tape measure in my phone. I filmed the blade marks, showing the cut width. I scoop a handful of salt into a Ziploc city mix with the brown anti-caking pellets. Our HOA vendor used straight white rock. I took shots of the city row marker stake buried by the curb. That night, I backed all of it up cloud, external drive, email to myself. If Diane wanted to pretend I was just some angry truck guy, she was going to have to argue with timestamps and GPS metadata too. Next, I started building a timeline. Left side of the legal pad. Every snow access notice with the date they claimed overages. Right side, Marty's plow logs for that same storm. Date, time, which unit ran the route. With her GPS pinged. Every single overage date from Diane lined up perfectly with a city plow run, and not a single invoice or log from any private contractor touching that street. Then I went hunting for the money. The HOA portal kept a couple years of budgets and annual meeting minutes. I pulled them all down. 3 winters back, that emergency snow access, Eastern Spur, line was 0. Then, 2 years ago, the year Diane became president, it appeared. $5,000 the first year. 8 the next. This year, 10. Same time, the minutes showed a motion. Approve engagement of Whitmore Community Safety Consulting, LLC, for seasonal safety services. No competitive bids. No RFP. Just board discussed and approved. I circled the date and underlined her last name. While Jenna read bedtime stories down the hall, I sat at the table highlighting phrases, safety, emergency, access road. She walked back in, saw the rainbow of markers, shook her head. You building a murder board or a lawsuit? Both, maybe, I said. I didn't stop with paper. I started treating Diane's emails like parts tags. Every time she sent some snippy message about my obstruction, I downloaded it as a PDF, preserving headers. I screenshotted her Facebook posts in the winter safety group, especially the ones where she hinted at huge extra costs on our back road. Then I did something that felt almost wrong. I went and talked to people. Not like Diane, with her hand on their arm and that politician smile. I was knocked on doors. Mrs. Patel next door, mug of tea in her hand, pulled out her own special assessment notice, identical to mine, same bogus description. She let me take a picture. Mr. Lawson's granddaughter had a stack of checks he'd mail for the snow people, because the HOA had scared him with talk of access for ambulances. I photographed the memos. Every story was the same. Diane invoking emergency winter access, hinting at danger, then pointing to that skinny street. The whole time, no one had ever seen a non-city truck touch it. By the end of the week, my dining room wall looked like something out of a crime show. Maps, logs, covenants, budget lines, photos of tire tracks, arrows of red Sharpie connecting Diane to Whitmore, to that phantom safety corridor. I wasn't a lawyer, but I didn't need to be. What I had was clearer, a pattern of them billing homeowners for a service the city already provided, on land they didn't own, funneled through a company with the president's name on it, and backed up by her own written statements. All I needed now was for them to step just a little further, to put in writing one more time that they were maintaining that road, and that my obstruction was costing them money. So I set the last piece. I drafted an email to the HOA board. Calm, respectful, very unlike the rant Diane expected from the truck guy. I asked specific questions about the snow contract, coverage area, and how emergency snow access, Eastern Spur, was calculated. I CC'd their generic legal address on purpose. Then I hovered over send for a second, feeling that mix of dread and satisfaction you get right before you turn the key on a rebuild engine. Because once they answered, they'd either have to lie in writing or admit on record that they were charging for snow they never moved. And giving them that choice was the last bolt I needed to torque down before I drove this whole mess straight into someone who could actually shut off their money. I hit send. Now, all that was left was to give Diane the perfect chance to stomp right into her own mess, in front of as many witnesses as possible. If you've ever had to play the long game with someone who thinks you're dumb because you work with your hands, hit subscribe, because the trap was set. I just needed her ego to take the bait. 2 days after I sent that email, Diane did exactly what I hoped she'd do. She overplayed her hand. She didn't answer me directly. Of course not. That would have meant treating the truck guy like a grown-up. Instead, we all got a blast from the HOA account. Emergency winter meeting, mandatory attendance. Topic: snow overages and resident noncompliance. She scheduled it for a Thursday night, right as another storm was rolling in. The subject line might as well have said, "Everyone please come watch me put the mechanic in his place." Perfect. I spent that afternoon finishing my homework. I printed Marty's plow logs again, this time on big 11 by 17 sheets. Highlighted every pass on our spur in neon yellow. Printed the GIS map at poster size down at the office supply store, the public right-of-way shaded bright green. Blew up the budget page where emergency snow access, Eastern Spur/Safety Corridor, sat right above Whitmore Community Safety Consulting, LLC. I slid everything into a beat-up presentation folder Jenna had from some PDA thing. She looked at the stack and smirked. "You go to a meeting or a court?" "Same difference," I said. "Only this judge wears a white parka." By 6 o'clock, the wind was already starting to howl. Big, fat flakes were coming in sideways under the streetlight as I crunched down to the clubhouse. Through the frosted windows, I could see half the neighborhood already packed in. Parkas, knit hats, that nervous pre-storm chatter. Inside, Diane had set the stage. Literally. She'd dragged the folding tables into a little dais at the front, HOA board lined up like a panel show. Her laptop was plugged into the projector, slide already up. Winter crisis, managing costs and safety. There was even a sign-in sheet at the door. For quorum, she chirped at people. I wrote my name, nice and slow, and took a seat in the back corner with my folder flat on my lap. Diane tapped the mic they'd borrowed from the church next door. "Thank you all for braving the weather," she said, that trained little smile glued in place. "We have some very serious issues to discuss tonight regarding snow overages, budget strain, and the behavior of certain residents." A couple heads swiveled toward me. Fine by me. Let her build the tension. She clicked through slides, charts of rising costs, pictures of cars buried in snow, dramatic stock images of ambulances stuck behind drifts. Then she got to the money. As many of you know, she said, our Eastern Access Road has required extensive emergency maintenance this season. Our safety contractor has had to make multiple extra passes to keep it clear due to obstructions and non-compliant parking. These unplanned costs are why some homes received special assessments. On the screen, a bar labeled Emergency Snow, Eastern Spur, shot up like a rocket. That was my cue, but I waited, because I needed one more thing from her. She changed slides. Up came a blurry photo of my driveway, my truck circled in angry red. This is the kind of situation, she said, that forces our contractor to resurface the access road. These vehicles might seem harmless, but they create real expenses that all of you end up paying for. Someone in the front row asked, so the HOA is actually paying to plow that whole back street? The city doesn't do it? Diane lifted her chin, eyes flicking toward me for half a heartbeat. The city does a basic pass, but it's not sufficient for our safety standards. Our vendor, Whitmore Community Safety Consulting, performs additional plowing and emergency salting to ensure access for EMS. There it was, on mic, in front of witnesses. I felt the click inside my chest, like a ratchet seating on a bolt. She kept talking, voice getting more righteous. And unfortunately, one particular resident has repeatedly challenged this arrangement, spreading misinformation that threatens our contracts and, frankly, your safety. That kind of behavior forces the board to consider legal remedies. She let that hang in the air, enjoying the little ripple of gasps. That's when I stood up. Chair legs scraped on the linoleum. The room went quiet except for the wind rattling the windows. Diane, I said, keeping my voice steady, since we're talking about facts and safety, mind if I ask a couple questions about that arrangement? She smiled like a kindergarten teacher indulging a slow kid. Mike, this really isn't the time for personal grievances. We're discussing community-wide issues. Oh, I know, I said, lifting the fat folder in my hand. That's why I brought community-wide receipts. Her smile twitched just a hair. Good, because this whole meeting, the dramatic slides, the mandatory attendance, the threats, it was exactly the stage I needed her to build so that when I finally dropped what I'd been quietly collecting, there'd be no way for her to pretend she hadn't known exactly what she was doing. And when she called on me anyway, certain she could shut me down in public the way she had on paper, I knew the bait had worked. They'd walked right into the only place more dangerous for a crooked HOA than a snowstorm. A room full of their own neighbors, about to see exactly where their winter money was really going. When they scheduled that emergency meeting to lecture me, I knew this was it, the perfect stage for the fall. Diane gave this tight little laugh into the mic. Okay, Mike, briefly. I walked down the aisle slow, folder in my hand, feeling every pair of eyes on the back of my neck. Diesel-stained Carhartt in a sea of Patagonia. I stopped halfway, turned so I could see her in the room at the same time. You said your contractor has to resurface our back road because of my truck. That those extra passes are what we're all paying for. That right? She folded her hands. Correct. As outlined in our emergency snow budget. Cool, I said. Let's look at that. I opened the folder and pulled out the first sheet, the blown-up budget page. Big text, highlighted box. Emergency snow access, Eastern Spur/Safety Corridor, vendor, Whitmore Community Safety Consulting, LLC. I held it chest high so the front rows could see. This ring any bells? Diane's jaw clenched for half a second. That's our safety vendor. I failed to see. Whitmore, I said. Same as your last name. That your company? A murmur rolled through the chairs. She lifted her chin. It's a small consulting firm my husband and I own. Perfectly normal for boards to engage resident businesses. We disclosed everything. Sure, I nodded. We'll come back to that. I slid the budget sheet onto the nearest table. Let's talk about the road you say you're maintaining. I pulled out the GIS map Marty had sent, poster size, bright green stripe for the public right-of-way. I clipped it to the whiteboard at the front of the room, right over her PowerPoint. You all see this? I tapped the legend. That skinny line is our so-called Eastern Access. Highlighted here, as public right-of-way. City property, not HOA common area. I flicked to the next printout, the exhibit from our covenants. And here's every private street the HOA actually maintains. Notice what's missing? Mr. Lawson squinted from the front row. That little back road ain't on there. Exactly. I pointed between the papers. City says it's theirs. Our own documents say it's not ours. But somehow, I tapped the budget again. We've been paying 10 grand this year alone for emergency snow access on that public street, through a company with the president's name on it. Diane leaned into the mic, voice icy. You are wildly mischaracterizing standard safety services. Our vendor supplements city plowing when it's inadequate. We have invoices. About those invoices, I said, and pulled out the plow logs. Big 11 by 17 sheets, neon yellow highlights. I held one up. These are the city's GPS logs for every storm this season. Right here, I ran my finger along the line, is Unit 27 running our spur. Same time, same dates as every overage Diane billed us for. I flipped to the next page. Any other truck IDs on there? Any secondary contractor? Silence. Folks in the second row were leaning forward now, reading upside down. And because I know some of you think I'm just the angry truck guy, I went on, I brought show and tell. I waved to Jenna at the back. She hit play on her phone. From the little Bluetooth speaker on the table came the sound of chains and diesel, then my own low voice from a week earlier. It's 4:12 a.m. That's Unit 27, City Rig, dropping blade on the spur. On the video, you could see the city logo, the blade cutting one clean pass, backing out. Recorded from my front window last storm. I said, you know who I have never seen on that road? I looked right at Diane. Anybody from Whitmore Safety Consulting. Diane's face had gone from porcelain to blotchy pink. You don't know every aspect of our operations, Mike. Our work may be at different hours, different days. Pre-treatment, for example. Pre-treatment with what? I cut in. Because I grabbed samples. I held up the little Ziploc of salt. This is city mix, brown pellets, coarse rock. Your contractor uses straight white. I took this off the Eastern Access the same days you told us your vendor did emergency salting. Someone in the middle row muttered, Jesus. I laid everything out on the table in front of the board, map, logs, covenants, budget, a blue-collar autopsy. Then I pulled out one last paper. This one got their attention. Thick stock, official seal at the top. This, I said, is from the city auditor's office. And this 1 inch, I held up another with a different seal, is from the State Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division. They got very interested when I filed a complaint that our HOA was billing homeowners for snow removal on a public right-of-way the city already maintains and paying that money to a company owned by the board president. The room went dead quiet. You could hear the heater cycle off. I read the line I'd highlighted. Pending investigation into potential misuse of association funds and fraudulent assessment practices, financial institutions are hereby instructed to suspend disbursements from Cedar Ridge Estates HOA operating accounts, except for essential utilities, until further notice. I looked up. In plain English, your little snow overage gravy train just got its budget frozen. Diane's composure cracked. You did what? Her voice jumped an octave. I asked the people who actually maintain that street what was going on, I said. And then I showed them your emails, your invoices, your budget entries. The ones where you blamed resident commercial vehicles. I hooked a thumb on my chest for costs that don't exist, so you could keep hitting us with bogus emergency fees. A dad from 2 houses down raised his hand, but he didn't wait to be called on. Is this true? He demanded at the board. You've been charging us for a road the city plows? And paying yourselves? Another neighbor, one of Diane's Facebook cheerleaders, looked like someone had yanked the rug out from under her. Diane, you said we were barely covering expenses. Diane gripped the edge of the table. These are outrageous accusations. You don't understand how much liability the board carries, how much work goes into safety. Funny thing about liability, I said quietly. When you start double billing for public services, it doesn't stay small time. I slid the AG letter closer to her. They've also asked for copies of all contracts with Whitmore Safety Consulting. All bank statements. All board minutes where you approved paying your own company. You might want to find those before the subpoena does. Her mouth opened and closed. Nothing came out. Behind me, someone let out a low whistle. So we've been paying extra every winter for nothing? Not for nothing, I said. For this. I tapped the budget line with her name on it. Mr. Lawson's voice shook as he spoke up. I've been sending checks I can't afford because you told me ambulances wouldn't get to my house if I didn't. You looked me in the eye, ma'am. Was that a lie? Diane actually flinched. Her gaze flicked around the room, looking for a friendly face, a lifeline. All those people she'd primed with Facebook posts and whispered warnings about the truck guy were staring back at her like they were seeing her for the first time. The board treasurer cleared his throat. Diane, we need to adjourn. Immediately. I need to call the bank. No, someone snapped from the back. You're not walking out of here without answering. Voices rose, overlapping. How much did you pay yourselves? Did you get multiple bids? Or just pick your own company? I want every dime of those snow fees back. The orderly little meeting Diane had staged to humiliate me dissolved into a storm she couldn't shovel herself out of. And exposing her in public, with her own paperwork and the state's letterhead on the table, that was just the beginning. Because taking her reputation in that room was one thing. What came next hit her where HOA presidents feel it the most, their money and their power. If you've ever wanted to tell an HOA exactly where to stick their bogus fees, drop a comment, because what happened after that letter hit their bank account was the real payback. When that meeting finally imploded, I walked home in the middle of a whiteout, feeling something I hadn't felt all winter. They weren't holding the shovel anymore. The fallout started the very next morning. At 8:07 a.m., my phone buzzed with an email blast from the treasurer. Temporary suspension of essential HOA payments. He tried to spin it as some routine administrative review, but the wording was almost word for word what the AG's office had sent. Translation: the bank had frozen everything that wasn't lights, insurance, or the basic snow contract. No more emergency access payouts. No more checks to Whitmore Safety Consulting. No more cash cow. Within hours, the group chat lit up. Why is auto pay for my dues declined? Board just canceled the Easter event? What do you mean we can't pay the landscaper deposit? People who'd barely glanced at a budget line 3 days ago were suddenly asking real questions. That Saturday, they called a closed-door board work session at the clubhouse. Word got out anyway. I didn't even have to show up. Neighbors started sending me pictures through the blinds. Diane at the table, hair less perfect, jabbing at a stack of papers. Treasurer rubbing his forehead. 2 other board members looking like they just realized they were on a sinking ship, not a yacht. By Monday, the first real consequence hit her personally. The bank sent a follow-up. Because Whitmore Safety Consulting was a related party, all payments to it were under review. The HOA would need to provide all Whitmore contracts and invoices, proof of work performed, minutes showing competitive bids and disclosures. In the middle of winter, with another storm on the forecast, Diane couldn't cut herself another emergency check without technically defying a directive tied to an AG complaint. She went ballistic. I know, because she accidentally CC'd half the neighborhood on an email meant just for the board. This is an overreaction to one resident's vindictive complaint, she wrote, caps and all. If we let bone-color bullies dictate operations, this community will fall apart. Didn't quite play how she thought. By evening, there was a petition circulating, not from me, for an emergency recall of the board. Mrs. Patel knocked on my door with it, pen in hand. I didn't understand before, she said, eyes hard. You were right. This is stealing. We're done. 48 hours later, the clubhouse was overflowing again. This time, there was no PowerPoint. Diane looked smaller. Same white parka, but no mic, no smile. The treasurer cleared his throat and read a prepared statement about allegations under investigation, frozen discretionary accounts, and steps to rebuild trust. Then he dropped the sentence she'd been dreading. Effective immediately, Whitmore Community Safety Consulting is terminated as a vendor, and President Whitmore has submitted her resignation from a board. You could feel the air shift. Diane opened her mouth like she might fight it, then saw every eye in that room. The people she'd cultivated as her audience were now a jury. She turned that stare on me like this was somehow still my fault. I just looked back. You told me people like me don't understand budgets, I said, quiet enough that only the first few rows heard. Looks like we understood enough. A couple neighbors actually clapped. But losing her title wasn't the only hit. The treasurer went on. They'd hired an outside CPA on the AG's recommendation to audit 3 years of books. All snow overages tied to the fake access road were being tallied. Any unsubstantiated payments, especially to Whitmore, were flagged for recovery. Refunds, he said, tripping over the word, will be issued to affected homeowners once the audit is complete. Mr. Lawson raised his hand from the front row. So, the checks I sent because she scared me about ambulances. I get that back? Yes, sir, the treasurer said. Every dollar we can legally claw back. In the back, some of Diane's Facebook cheerleaders stared at the floor. One of them actually walked over to me afterward. I'm sorry, she said. I believed her when she said you were costing us money. I shrugged. You weren't the only one. Practically, the next few weeks were messy. With the emergency line item frozen, they had to run the HOA on a bare-bones budget. No more catered socials. No more silly decor inspections. They re-upped the boring, reputable snow contractor on a straight contract for the streets we actually owned. Every new expense, over a couple $100, needed a community vote. Funny thing happened. When the board couldn't use money as a weapon, those yellow violation envelopes dried up. Nobody towed my truck again. In fact, at the next storm, the new interim president asked me, on record, to coordinate with the snow company about best parking practices for the loop. The guy who'd been obstructing operations a month before was now their unofficial operations consultant. Can you help us draft guidelines that actually make sense? He asked. Yeah, I said, but they're going to be in plain English, and they're going to apply to everyone. We ended up with a one-page winter policy. No street parking during blizzards, clear sidewalks within 24 hours, check on your elderly neighbors. Nothing about ugly trucks. Nothing about aesthetics. For the first time since we moved in, the HOA felt like a bunch of neighbors trying to keep the place livable, not a wannabe city hall shaking people down. From the outside, it might have looked like I won the fight. But walking past the clubhouse one night and seeing the notice about the ongoing state investigation taped to the glass, I knew this was bigger than me and a few bogus snow fees. The budget was frozen. Diane's little side hustle was exposed. The power dynamic in our subdivision had flipped hard. And yet, even with her gone and the money dammed up, there was one thing that still gnawed at me every time the wind picked up and the plows rolled by. If one president could pull a stunt like that here, in a 30-house subdivision in Cleveland Heights, what else was hiding under the snow in other neighborhoods just like ours? If this story hit a nerve because you've seen power abused in the name of community standards, hit like, because what came out of that audit proved Diane's snow scam was just the tip of the iceberg. Spring in Cleveland doesn't really arrive. It slowly stops trying to kill you. By the time the last dirty snow piles melted off the curb, the audit reports started landing. Not as dramatic as that night in the clubhouse. No yelling, no slammed doors. Just a thick envelope from the CPA the state recommended, slid through every mailbox on the loop. I open hours at the kitchen table, half expecting legalese I'd need a translator for. Instead, it read like a maintenance log. 3 years of emergency snow access, Eastern Spur fees. 3 years of payments to Whitmore Community Safety Consulting. 0 documented work orders. 0 vendor logs. 0 GPS, photos, or job tickets. The auditor didn't call it theft. They didn't have to. They used words like improper, self-dealing, and subject to reimbursement. For a guy who lives under trucks, that was just fancy talk for. You took money that wasn't yours. They attached a chart showing what that meant per house. Mr. Lawson's eyes actually teared up when he saw the number on his refund line. I can fix the ramp now, he said, voice cracking. Been putting it off for 2 winters. A week later, the bank cut checks. Not full justice. Nothing ever really is, but thick little rectangles of paper made out to every family they'd scared with talk of access corridors and ambulance routes. The new interim board called a meeting, this time with coffee in mismatched mugs and no projector. They passed around a plain English summary of new rules. No more related party contracts without 3 bids and a community vote. No more emergency line items that weren't tied to a signed, verifiable service agreement. No more fines stacked for aesthetic reasons without a safety basis. I sat in the back, same chair as before, hands cleaner this time. When they got to Winter Operations Committee, the president cleared his throat. "Mike," he said, we were wondering if you'd be willing to advise? You actually know what you're doing out there." A couple people chuckled. Not at me, at the understatement. I thought about the night my truck disappeared in a whiteout, that orange toe tag flapping on my mailbox, while Diane told me people like you don't understand budgets. "I'll help," I said. "On one condition." The room went still. "We put in writing," I said. "Snow policy that makes sense. Priority on the elderly. Keep the loop clear. Work with the city instead of pretending we're a second highway department. And nobody gets to invent fees because they don't like what someone drives to work." "Mrs. Patel nodded so hard her earrings shook. "Mr. Lawson gave me this little salute with his coffee cup." They voted the policy in on the spot. By the time the next winter rolled around, things felt different. Same busted-up mailboxes, same icy wind knifing down from the lake, same old city rig growling past at 4 but no neon envelopes on my windshield. No Facebook groups about problem residents. Instead, we had a phone tree to check on the seniors when the forecast went bad. We had a shared shovel rack by the mail kiosk. My eyesore work truck? It turned into the unofficial neighborhood snow command center. Kids thought the strobe light was the coolest thing on earth. Diane, as far as I know, moved to a different suburb. Rumor is she tried for the board there, too. I like to think the little note in her file from the AG about prior investigation into misuse of association funds gave somebody pause. Every once in a while, I'll be under a city spreader at 3 a.m, road salt falling in my hair, and I'll think about that frozen budget letter with her name sitting right under the word suspended. She wanted to freeze people like me out of her community. In the end, the only thing that got frozen was the account she used to pay herself. I don't hate HOAs. I hate bullies who hide behind letterhead and talk about standards when what they mean is people like you don't belong here. The truth is, most of the folks on our new board are just trying to keep the lights on and the bills paid. They learned something watching a blue-collar guy walk into a meeting with salt samples and route maps. Sometimes the person you've been treating like background noise is the only one who knows how the system actually works. And once you've seen how easy it was for one president to turn a snowstorm into a personal ATM, you don't unsee it. Now, when a glossy mailer shows up from some management company promising to maximize revenue or enhance enforcement, people don't just nod along. They ask who gets paid? For what? And where does it say that in writing? That's the real win. Not just that Diane lost her title or that my neighbors got their winter money back. It's that the next time someone in this subdivision starts talking like a little mayor in a white parka, there's a room full of people ready to ask for the map, the log, and the contract before they hand over a dime. And if you're sitting in some other cul-de-sac right now, staring at a special assessment that doesn't smell right, remember this. You don't need a law degree to push back. Sometimes you just need to know where the plow tracks really come from and be stubborn enough to follow them. In that neighborhood, the war with the HOA was over. But for those who know the system from the inside, they know there's always another committee president somewhere who thinks they're above the law. Subscribe to the channel and watch